Hi, welcome to my channel if you're new, welcome back if you are a subscriber. So I am wearing my cute new Halloween sweater. I'm so excited about it today. I love it. And I'm also reading my Scream earrings, which is perfect for the vibes of this video. And yeah, I'm just so ready for this spooky season. So today I have a very exciting video. I will be recommending to you so many horror and thriller books, literally more than 70 recommendations. Now, when I was making this list and planning the video, I had no idea I would find that many titles to recommend, and most of them I have read, some I haven't, but it just turned out being like this. So I'm really excited to share all of these recommendations with you. So I'm going to be doing this where I share the readathon prompts that I am co-hosting. So I am co-hosting Stabathon and Spooktober. I'll be sharing those prompts, recommending horror and thriller books that fit into those prompts. And then at the end, I will just be doing everything else that I think you all should read during this season, during this spooky season, and those ones will just be ones that didn't really fit into the prompts. So I'm going to first read all of the prompts for the two readathons, and then we'll get into the video. This may be a long one, so maybe you want to grab a snack or your favorite fall drink, and yeah, let's just get into the video. So a quick note, for any more information on these readathons, like who all the co-hosts are and everything, please check the description. Just to keep this video not a billion years long, I'm just going to skip right into the prompts. So for Stabathon prompts, the first one is Chucky, Child's Play. Read a book involving children and or dolls. Halloween, read a book with black or orange on the cover. Friday the 13th, read a book set during the summer. Carrie, read a book with supernatural vibes. Psycho, read a slasher. And Get Out, read a book by a BIPOC author. So then for Spooktober prompts, which is taking place all month, Stabathon is just the 4th through the 10th. Dark Academia, read a dark academia book. Morally Gray, read a book featuring morally gray characters. Witchy Vibes, read a book with witchcraft and or folklore. BIPOC Rep, read a book by a BIPOC author or featuring a BIPOC character. And then Halloween, read a book featuring Halloween related elements. So let's get into the recommendations. I'm going to start with the Stabathon prompts. So for reading a book involving children, I chose The Dollhouse. And this one looks super cool. So it's basically a comic book. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a comic book, and it also has some really haunting pictures in here. Just to share one that kind of sold me on this book, look at how freaky this picture is. Absolutely terrifying. So I'll just read the synopsis really quick. When Alice is 6, she is given a beautiful antique dollhouse. When things in her life get crazy, Alice turns to her dolls and dollhouse for comfort. One day, they invite her to come play inside with them. As Alice's life is turned upside down in the big world, she is always welcomed home to the little world inside the dollhouse. The house will even grant her a wish if she agrees to live with them. Follow Alice through the door of the dollhouse and into the demon's den. The next book I'd like to talk about is A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. And I read this one last November, and boy did this one scare me. It really freaked me out in a certain scene in particular. So this is about a family, and the daughter seems like she may be possessed. And so the family's really tight on medical bills because they've been taking her to specialists, and they kind of go to a priest as a last resort, and this priest recommends doing an exorcism. But in order to pay for all the bills, they actually invite this TV show, kind of wanting to document the whole thing, into their home, and they start documenting everything. So it's a really messed up situation, and this is actually told by the younger sister of the girl who seems to be possessed. And it was so interesting to read from a perspective from a little child and just read all these haunting things happening. And I just highly recommend this book. It really freaked me out. And the ending is so scarring. If anybody has read this, please let me know in the comments. Like, that ending was chilling. The next book I highly recommend is Confession, and this is by CAINEI. And this definitely fits this prompt because it's about a teacher who is giving her last lecture to a group of middle school students, and this teacher's daughter unfortunately passed away, and the teacher at the end of her lecture says, "Someone in this room is responsible for killing my daughter," and it takes off from there. It is the most wild book possibly I've I've ever read. My jaw was dropping the whole entire read, and I would just highly recommend this. The next book I want to talk about is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and I absolutely love this cover. It's so cool. So this is featuring teens, but we're gonna make it work for this prompt. A few of the ones later on are featuring teens. So this is about Pippa, and she's working on her senior capstone project, and she chooses to do her project on a case from 5 years prior about a murdered girl. This case is cold, but as she starts researching this capstone project, she starts to unveil some of these secrets, and someone doesn't want her getting to these secrets, and it is very obvious that actually the person who's locked up for this murder may not be who the real killer is, and she has to figure out who the real killer is and how to stop them. Something else I really enjoyed about this book is it has a lot of multimedia elements, so it makes it really engaging to read it. My next recommendation is No Exit by Taylor Adams, and here's the cover for No Exit. And this one is such a fast-paced thriller. It really honestly reads like a movie in my opinion. This is about a girl who's trapped at a rest stop in the middle of a snowstorm, and she sees in the back of a truck that one of the people at the rest stop has put a child in a cage in there and has kidnapped a child. So she realizes someone in this group of people is a kidnapper, and so she tries to figure out who they are and how she can protect this child. The next recommendation is The Bear Who Wouldn't Leave by J.H. Moncrieff. This is about a 10-year-old boy who is given this creepy bear by his stepfather, and he tries to get rid of it because it's really freaking him out, but he cannot get rid of it, and this bear starts to do some really haunting things. So this is a novella, and it's a really fast read. I would highly recommend this one. I haven't really heard many people talk about it, but I think it's truly chilling, and I would really recommend it. It doesn't have to do with dolls, but it has to do with a bear, so it's kind of like a haunted toy. The next one I want to recommend is one that I'm not personally a huge fan of, but I know a lot of people have enjoyed it, and I wanted to recommend it for this category. So it is The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn, and this is another short novella. This is about a psychic who visits her client's creepy Victorian house because this client wants her to check it out and see if it seems like there's something paranormal going on there. So this client's stepson is really, really weird and disturbing, and so that's why I am putting it in this category. And I will say it was so well written and I was very engaged. I think the reason I didn't like it was because the ending was very ambiguous, and I generally don't like ambiguous endings, so if an ambiguous ending doesn't bother you, I would definitely give this one a shot. Mine by Delilah S. Dawson is the next book I'd like to talk about, and this is actually a middle grade horror, and I'm reading it right now. I am really, really close to the end, and I'm really enjoying it. So this is about a 12-year-old girl, and she's forced to move to Florida with her family, and she hates her new house. They actually move into this hoarder's house, so they have to clean out all of the junk in it, and it's just so hot. She doesn't like Florida. She moved from Colorado, so the weather is totally different. But she starts to experience this weird paranormal activity, and it seems like it may be haunted by the ghost of the girl who used to live there. So I'm really, really enjoying it. This is my first middle grade horror, and I'm reading it really fast, and I would highly recommend it. None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney is my next rec for you all. Two teenagers are chosen by the FBI to provide insight and to help cold cases. Emma starts to communicate with one of the most notorious serial killers though, and I don't want to say much more from there. It's so good. If you enjoyed the story of The Silence of the Lambs like I did, I would highly recommend this one. It is so well written, and I absolutely loved it. So House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland is just such an amazing read. Three sisters disappeared when they were children and reappeared, but they seemed totally different when they reappeared. They couldn't remember what happened to them, their appearance totally changed, and their father started to suspect that they weren't actually his children anymore. These three sisters seem to have powers over others, and one day, now fast forward in the future, one of the sisters disappears again, and the other two are left to try to figure out what happened to their sister. This is such a good book. This is totally like a dark fairy tale, and it is just, the writing is so lyrical. I just totally ate this book up. It's so haunting. The imagery is beautiful. I think it's perfect for this time of year, and I would highly recommend it. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, and this one is such a good atmospheric novel to read during this time of year. This is about a woman who goes to nanny for a family, and they live in this remote house, and there's so much smart technology in the house. You don't control anything by switch, you just tell it to turn on the lights, and it's sort of like this Alexa that controls everything. So she starts to feel a little bit uneasy there, and she also starts to suspect that there may be some paranormal activity going on, and the children are a little bit creepy. So if you like The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is based on The Turn of the Screw, this is based on The Turn of the Screw as well, I would highly recommend this one. And actually, The Nesting apparently is based on The Turn of the Screw as well and reads a lot like this one, so I really need to check that one out. Thornhill by Pam Smythe is a graphic novel that I want to share about. So this is middle grade, and I will also warn you, it's really sad, but if you can get past that, I think this is worthwhile to pick up. So I'll show you really quick some of the drawings in here. They're really beautiful. Some of them are quite haunting. Isn't this terrifying? This is so haunting. So this book is told in parallel plot lines, which was really unique to read. So one is told solely through pictures and the other is told through diary entries. Mary is an orphan at Thornhill Institute for Children, and she is terribly bullied. Ella, in present day, moves to a house that overlooks this Thornhill Institute, and she starts to discover what happened in the past. I would not be able to get through a Horror Rex video without talking about The Shining by Stephen King. I think everybody knows what this one is about, but I'm putting it in this kid category because Danny is actually very important to the plot, so I think this fits a horror book involving children. He's not necessarily creepy as he's depicted in the movie, but he definitely has this special ability called The Shining, which is really fun to read about. I also want to read Unheard, and this is a new release this October. So this is about Tess's 3-year-old daughter, and she starts to draw these creepy drawings, and basically she starts to suspect that maybe her daughter has witnessed something terrible and she wants to protect her. So I love the creepy drawings from children trope in movies. I've seen it all over, so I think it's going to be really fun to read it in a book. So let's move on to the next prompt, and it is read a book with black or orange on the cover, and for sake of time, I'm just going to give one recommendation for this one, kind of my top recommendation, but a lot of these books could fit this category, and it's probably the easiest one to complete. So definitely my top recommendation for this one is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is one of my favorite horror novels of all time. I read it recently and absolutely fell in love with it. This is about a group of housewives in the 90s who decide to start a book club to kind of spice up their lives. They kind of have boring lives, just taking care of their kids and always, tending for their husbands. And so they make this book club where they read about spooky things, so true crime and horror books. But one day, a mysterious person enters their town and kind of becomes a part of the community, and they start to suspect something is up with him and that he possibly might be, you guessed it, a vampire. This book has so much heart, it made me cry. The gore is on point. Grady Hendrix writes amazing gore, and I absolutely love this book. So let's move on to the next prompt. So books set in the summer. And for this one, I'm going to be reading Under the Blade. Hey, so this is Editing Savannah. I still haven't put back my bookshelves from last night's rec video, but I realized I forgot to share Under the Blade in the synopsis. So the synopsis for this one says, some campfire stories are real. It's been 25 years since Cyrus Hoyt's infamous killing spree at Camp Forest Grove, a quarter century since teenage counselor Melanie Holden left him mortally wounded and escaped with her life. Today, Melanie's teaching career has bottomed out and left her with no choice but to return to the scene of the crime. Motivated by a lucrative publishing offer, as well as a desire to free herself from recurring nightmares, Melanie's research into the murderer's life brings resistance from all directions as she uncovers skeletons in Forest Grove's past. Because of Melanie, a long-held secret is about to be revealed, one that somebody is willing to kill for in order to protect. And Melanie is going to discover she has a lot more to lose than just her mind. So for my first recommendation, I want to recommend Brother by Anya Alborn. This is about a family of serial killers who live out in the middle of nowhere. One of the brothers starts to fall in love with a girl who kind of fits the MO of the family, who they like to capture and kill, and things get complicated. I would highly recommend this one, but trigger warnings, it is very gross, it's very bloody, and there's also a bit of animal cruelty involving rabbits that was really, really hard for me to read about. But this is a really good book for this prompt. The next one that I already discussed is the Southern Book Club's Guide, which takes place in the summer. So Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez is a wonderful book for this prompt. It is about a group of college students who rent a cabin in the woods. It's super remote and there is a cannibal on the loose. So this is a great homage to 80s slasher horror, and I highly recommend this book for some great gore, great kills, and just a super fun time. All right, The Troop by Nick Cutter is a good summer read as well. So this one, read at your own risk. Again, it is really gross. Don't read this while you're eating. And there's also, unfortunately, some animal cruelty in here. So yeah, read at your own risk. Some of these scenes I sort of skipped over, but overall I really did enjoy this book. This is about a group of Boy Scouts and they get stuck on this island and there's a tapeworm infestation. And it's sort of a Lord of the Flies feel kind of book, and it gets wild. So this one is truly horrifying, but a great horror wreck. So I'm going to recommend two cabin-y thrillers. They both have similar plots on the surface level, and I'm just skimming over some things here, so I'll share what they both have in common. So Just Married by Kirsten Modglin, and then The Stalker by Sarah Alderson. So they're both about newly married couples going to remote locations to have a honeymoon, and it seems like a stalker is out to get them. So I have to talk about my favorite author, Riley Sager. The Last Time I Lied would be a perfect book for this prompt. Emma is invited back to a summer camp that she attended years ago, and when she was there, actually 3 of her friends disappeared and no one knows what happens to them. But she gets invited back to be an art instructor, and so she goes back and she tries to figure out what happened to her friends all those years ago. So the next book I want to talk about is It by Stephen King. This is a quintessential summer horror book. I unfortunately haven't finished it yet. I kind of put it down for a little while, but I would highly recommend this book for this summer prompt. However, I don't think anyone would be able to finish it during this readathon, but I just kind of wanted to throw it in because if you are generally looking for horror books set in the summer, this is a great book to read. Wonderland by Jennifer Hillier is a good book for this prompt as well. People are disappearing and turning up dead at a creepy amusement park, and it basically focuses on figuring out who is committing these crimes. So I didn't love this book a ton, mostly because I wanted more of the creepy horror atmosphere and I didn't get a ton of that, but I'm recommending this for people because it still is really well written, and if you really appreciate from the detective's point of view, I would recommend it. I was recommended Joyland by Stephen King for creepy carnival atmosphere. I forgot to grab that book, it's over there, but I'll have to check that one out as well. I just read the other weekend while camping, The Woods Are Always Watching by Stephanie Perkins, and I really enjoyed this book. This is about 2 high school best friends who are about to go their separate ways with college across the country from each other, and they decide to take one more trip together to sort of have one last hurrah before this, and they decide to go backpacking in the remote woods, and soon conflict arises between the two and they end up walking into one of their worst nightmares. So an adventure horror thriller would be Getaway by Zoya Stage. Unfortunately, this one really disappointed me, but I think some people still may really enjoy it. It just didn't quite take the route I wanted it to. This one is about a group of 3 women who decide to go hiking in the isolated section of the Grand Canyon, and it appears that there may be someone stalking them. So moving on to the supernatural elements prompt, I will be reading 12 Nights at Rotter House by J.W. Oker. This one is about a writer who writes about the world's most haunted places, and he asks if he can go to this infamous Rotterdam mansion and stay 13 nights, and he starts to experience some wild paranormal activity and some shocking things happen. And I've been told that this is a shocking novel, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one because I would like to be shocked and scared. We are back to talking about Riley Sager, and I'm so excited because this is one of my favorite books ever, and it is Home Before Dark. Maggie has inherited the house that her family fled from years ago, and them fleeing from this house sparked a best-selling book from her father. And her father talked about the events leading up to why they left and talked about all the paranormal activity that was happening in the house. And Maggie never has really believed anything in the book. So when she goes back, she starts renovating the house, but then she starts to wonder if some of the things in her father's book were actually true. Lock Every Door by Riley Sager is also very, very creepy and atmospheric, just like Home Before Dark. It is about Jules, who goes to apartment sit at this beautiful apartment building. It's this historic apartment building that only really famous and luxurious people live in. It's super secretive, and basically one of the apartment sitters though goes missing and she has to figure out what happened. And it definitely has a little bit of some paranormal vibes going on in here, and it's a little bit freaky. The next book I want to recommend is The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, and this is actually the Lights Out book club pick for my book club in October, and my co-host will be Erin from Erin Megan. So yeah, I wanted to just share that this is my book club pick for this month. And this one's very ambiguous, and I just kind of want to go into it more blind. Another good book that I've already mentioned for this prompt would be Mine by Delilah S. Dawson. Hill Creek by Scott Thomas would be perfect for this prompt. This is about a group of horror authors who are invited to stay at this notorious haunted house on Halloween night. The last section was just absolutely wild. Let me know in the comments if you have read this book, but yeah, it was very creepy, and I would highly recommend this for a creepy haunted house story. So I want to recommend this next one for someone who's looking for a book that's not that scary, but it's still classified as horror, but more just has those paranormal elements and a nice kind of cozy horror vibe. And that would be The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. And this is about a family who are building a house on haunted land, and they start to learn about the history of the land, and there are also some witchy vibes in this as well. And another book kind of with the same vibes would be The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. Both of these are not that scary. They have some paranormal elements, but I think if you enjoy The Invited or if you enjoy The Broken Girls, you would enjoy either of the books because they are a little bit similar. So in The Broken Girls, the main character's sister was murdered and found dead next to this famous girls' school, and this school was meant for troubled girls in the past, and it's also from the perspective of girls who lived there in World War II, and they are the troubled girls, and you kind of learn about their friendships and what they're experiencing at the school and sort of possibly a ghost that they are encountering. So I haven't read any of these books, but I do want to recommend them because they all sound wonderful for this prompt. So the first one is White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson, and this sounds like a really good haunted house story. Also, The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig has been getting some amazing reviews, and it sounds super, super intriguing. Nothing But Blackened Teeth is coming out, and this one is coming out after Stabathon, but I still wanted to recommend it just in this prompt, just if you are looking for paranormal books, because it looks so good. This is about a wedding celebration taking place in this creepy abandoned mansion in Japan, and lurking in the shadows is a hungry bride. This cover is just so scarring as well, so I hope it's as scary as the cover. So The Restoration is also coming out after the readathon, but I wanted to mention it as well, and it is by J.H. MONCRIEFF, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote the book The Bear Who Wouldn't Leave. And this one is about a woman who is hired to restore an old mansion, and she goes there with her daughter, but things start to turn creepy. If it's anything like her other novella, it's going to be really creepy and super good. So another book I really want to read is The Girls Are Never Gone, and this is by Sarah Glenn Marsh, and this is marketed as The Conjuring meets Sadie, and I love The Conjuring, love the Conjuring universe, and I really enjoyed the book Sadie. So it sounds right up my alley. So this is about Chase, and she runs a paranormal podcast where she talks about all things paranormal, and she's invited to this mansion that is rumored to be haunted, and then she goes to investigate. So it sounds really good, and I can't wait to read this one. Another book I really want to read is anything by Darcy Coates, but her newest book is called The Haunting of Lee Harker, so that one would be great for this prompt. And then the last book I want to talk about to fit this prompt is The Last Beautiful Girl by Nina Lauren. Izzy is forced to move from her hometown into this old mansion that has a tragic past, and something doesn't feel right. But she sort of starts this Instagram page and finds all these cool vintage outfits, and yeah, it just sounds really unique and interesting. It is a haunted house story, but I'm looking forward to those added elements in it. So the next next prompt is read a slasher, and for this one I'm going to be reading Evil Eye, a slasher story. And this one is about a group of strangers who are stuck on an island together during a hurricane, but one of them seems to want to kill everyone. Another good one for this would be Under the Blade, like I mentioned earlier. Final Girls would be great for this prompt as well. Quincy is a final girl, and also two other girls have been named in the media, final girls as well, but one of them dies and the other shows up on her doorstep and everything changes. Let's talk about another Grady Hendrix novel, and it is The Final Girls Support Group by none other than Grady Hendrix. So this one is a lot like Final Girls by Riley Sager, sort of in themes. A group of final girls have been meeting for years, and one day one of them is murdered, and now they all know their lives are at stake. And then a few other ones that I have mentioned earlier that would fit this prompt are Camp Slaughter and Brother. A new one I want to mention is The Venue by TJ Payne. This is a destination wedding going horribly wrong for the guests. And this one reminds me a lot of The Hunger Games or Battle Royale. It's very violent, it's very gory, the stakes are super high, and it's just a really fast-paced read. I would highly recommend it. I also really want to read Kin by Keelan Patrick Burke. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but it is on my Kindle. So for the BIPOC prompt, I will be reading The Taking of Jake Livingston, and I'm so excited to finally get to this. I've been meaning to read this so many times, and finally I'm gonna read it for this readathon. So Jake is one of the only black kids at St. Clair Prep, and it's hard to fit in already, but to make matters worse, he can see dead people. So this is giving me I can see dead people vibes from If You Know, You Know. Another BIPOC author I would like to recommend is Silvia Moreno Garcia and her book Mexican Gothic. This one is so good. It's so atmospheric. This is a gothic thriller that takes place in the 1950s and is super trippy, and the atmosphere is on point. I love her writing style so much. I was so immersed in the time period, and I would highly recommend this one. Another book by a BIPOC author is White Smoke that I mentioned before by Tiffany D. Jackson. Camp Slaughter fits great into this prompt as well by Sergio Gomez. I would like to talk about Ace of Spades. This one would be a really good read for this category. This is a YA thriller, and it's marketed as Get Out meets Gossip Girl. Two students receive threatening texts threatening to expose their secrets to everyone and ruin their lives. This book also has a very important commentary in it, and I would highly recommend reading this one. Another good book for this is Confessions by CAINEI. And then Dead Girls by Nikisa Afia. First of all, look at this cover. It needs to be an art print, but this is a mystery that takes place in 1920s Harlem, and I can't wait to get to this one. Now, Spooktober actually shares this prompt to read a book by a BIPOC author or with a BIPOC character, so that is a prompt that kind of overlapped between the two readathons. But now let's move on to Spooktober. So let's talk about the Dark Academia prompt. So for this one, I will first share what I'm reading for Spooktober, and it's the group read. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead, and this one sounds so good. So all I want to read from the little blurb is 6 friends, 1 college reunion, 1 unsolved murder. So this immediately grabbed my attention. I've been hearing amazing things about it, and I can't wait to read this and discuss it with all of the hosts. Possibly my favorite book of the year. Scratch that. It is my favorite book I've read all year, and that is They Never Learned by Lane Fargo. I absolutely am obsessed with this book. I swear I've never had so much fun reading a book. Such a good book, such a good thriller. This is about a professor who every year she chooses the worst man on campus and murders him. It also follows a student who is attending the same university. And I don't want to say any more. I just want to say, please read this book. Do yourself a favor. I don't think I've heard anybody who's read this who doesn't like this book, and that is kind of unusual because a lot of times there will be some person who doesn't like a book, but seriously, every single person I've talked to loves this book. It's so good. The dark academia vibes, the female serial killer vibes, like it's just everything I need in my life, honestly. So a book that fits perfectly into this prompt is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. A woman named Mariana is a group therapist, and she's still grieving the death of her husband. Her niece Zoe, who she has helped raise like a mother since she was a little girl, attends Cambridge University. But one day a student at Cambridge is murdered. They were Zoe's friend. So Mariana goes and tries to figure out what's going on and who committed this murder, and she begins to think it is a professor. And this professor sort of has this following of women who follow him around all the time and always listen to his lectures, and They are called The Maidens. So that's all I'm going to say about this book, but I really enjoyed the writing style. It was so fast-paced. There were journal entries, and the whole time I was trying to figure out who they were from, and it just propelled the story forward. The atmosphere was so good, and I just really enjoyed this book. I want to mention Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson because I feel like a lot of people will really enjoy this book. It just didn't work for me. It's a series, and it's a YA series, but this would be a good recommendation for dark academia because it does take place at this Ellingham Academy, and it is these students who are really prestigious, and they're trying to solve the mystery of what happened at Ellingham Academy and solve these murders. Also, I want to recommend For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. I haven't personally read this one, but it would fit this prompt perfectly. This seems to be about a professor who does super sketchy things to help his students reach their fullest potential. So that sounds really intriguing. All's Well by Mona Awad is another book I'd like to recommend. I have not read this one either. I'm going to share a little blurb. A darkly funny novel about a theater professor suffering chronic pain who, in the process of staging a troubled production of Shakespeare's most maligned play, suddenly and miraculously recovers. Also, I really want to get to A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, and this is a perfect book to read for this prompt as well. It says, for fans of Wilder Girls and Ninth House comes a dark, twisty, atmospheric thriller about a boarding school haunted by its history of witchcraft and two girls dangerously close to digging up the past. It sounds like history starts repeating itself, and the main character, Felicity, is forced to face the darkness at the campus herself. So once again, I love dark academic settings, so this one sounds right up my alley. The last book I want to talk about in this category is Have You Seen Me? And this is by Alexandria Weiss. So girls are disappearing at Waverly High, and Lindsay is missing. The new history teacher organizes a student investigation team, though, to try to figure out what happened. But now team members of that very investigation team are turning up dead. All the murdered students have something in common, a shared secret. So this one sounds amazing. I haven't read this one, but I definitely want to get to it very soon. So for morally gray characters, I only have one book that I can think of off the top of my head right now, and it is They Never Learn. Just talked about it, and yes, I know, it's a serial killer killing men, but they've done horrible things, so, you know, kind of morally gray there. So for witchy vibes, I would recommend, like I just read, A Lesson in Vengeance, and then The Invited, which I talked about earlier. Also, I have not read these two, but I'm really looking forward to The Year of the Witching by C.J. Cook, and here's the gorgeous cover for this one. I'm going to read a quick little blurb about it. A young woman living in a rigid, puritanical society discovers dark powers within herself in the stunning feminist fantasy debut. And then Cackle by Rachel Harrison, I'm so excited for. This one sounds so good, and it has such good reviews, and the cover is amazing. Amy was dumped by her longtime boyfriend, and she wants a fresh start. She accepts a teaching position in a small village, but soon she meets a new friend. So this friend is Sophie, and she immediately gravitates towards her, but there are some unusual things about Sophie, and the rest of the townsfolk seem afraid of her. Sophie appears to be uncanny and ageless. She has a mansion in the middle of the forest, and she almost seems to have certain powers. I wanted to recommend one more witchy book that sounds really good. So it's called The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. Single mother Liv is commissioned to paint a mural on a 100-year-old lighthouse in a remote Scottish island, and she takes it up and sees if it is an opportunity for a new start with her 3 daughters. And so basically 2 of her daughters go missing, and eventually she goes missing. And in the future, one of the sisters gets a call from one of the missing sisters, and she tries to figure out what's going on. But years ago, the mother was warned of wildlings, and wildlings are basically supernatural beings who mimic children, and they were created by witches for revenge. So she starts to think in present day that her sister who has turned up may be a wilding. So for Halloween elements, I'm actually going to make a whole video recommending Halloween books, so I just have a few titles to read really quick for some recommendations. So Dead Leaves by Keelan Patrick Burke, Dark Harvest by Norman Partridge, and Halloween Party by R.L. Stein. And I'll have some more recs coming soon in their own video. So now we've gotten to the part where I'm just recommending some general horror thriller books for you to read this season that didn't fit into these prompts. So the first one I want to talk about is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. So this is a book about vampires, and Stephen King really sets the tone in this for fall. He explains the whole town, and you really get this dark feeling while you're reading it. It just, the atmosphere is impeccable. You just really feel like you're a part of the town, you're learning its history, you learn about everybody in the town. And I remember reading this last year around Halloween, and it was just such a perfect book to read during this time of year. Let's talk about the iconic You, and this is by Caroline Kepnes, and this is the quintessential stalker story from the stalker's point of view. So this is about Joe, who is obsessed with Beck, and I would recommend this if you want something unsettling to read. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter is one of my favorite books of all time, and definitely one of my favorite thrillers of all time. 20 years ago, Claire's sister went missing and has never appeared since. Now, present day, another girl disappears, and Claire is convinced that they are linked. When she starts to uncover the truth about what actually happened to her sister, she starts to learn some very, very dark things that she wasn't expecting, and her life will never be the same again. There are some serious content warnings with Karen Slaughter's writing. It feels very gritty and real, and I would just highly recommend looking up the trigger warnings, but this is an exceptional read, and I just can't recommend this enough if you're able to handle it. Still House Lake by Rachel Caine is an exceptional book. This is about a woman who unknowingly was married to a brutal serial killer. He's now locked up, but there are trolls who are constantly harassing her and her family, and so she is trying to keep her 2 kids protected, and she's always on the run with them. And this is such an emotional book. You really care for the family, and the story is just exceptional, and I would highly recommend this. This is in a series. Horror Store by Grady Hendrix is exceptional. It is so good. It's hilarious. The gore is on point. It is a knockoff IKEA store story, and yeah, it's amazing. Look how it is formatted. It's formatted like an IKEA catalog, and if you see the back, it is spooky and so much fun. It's also a really fast read, so it would be fun to kind of just pick this up and read it in 1 or 2 goes. I think I read it in 2 sittings. Survive the Night is a very good book by Riley Sager. Charlie is stuck in a car with a serial killer, and she has to figure out how to survive the night. The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson is one of the most twisty books I've ever read before. Such good plot twists. I loved how the characters were connected. And this is about a man who meets this woman at an airport bar, and he jokingly says, "I want to kill my wife." And she said, "Okay, let's do it." The Devil of Nanking by Mo Hader actually was not a very highly rated book by me personally, but I think a lot of people would really enjoy it, so I'm recommending it here, and it is so, so haunting. There was one scene towards the end that seriously disturbed me, so I would look up content warnings for this one as well. And this is about a solitary Englishwoman, Gray, who comes to Japan looking for a rare piece of footage that is said to document a particularly monstrous episode of the 1937 Nanking Massacre. So the next book I want to talk about is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. A girlfriend is driving with her boyfriend during a snowstorm, and she starts to think about ending things. It's very ambiguous. You won't know what the hell is happening like at all during this book, but the ending is amazing. It all ties together, and it totally just goes somewhere you're not expecting at all. It is one of the most intense books. It's so unsettling. You're just so unsettled the whole time, and it keeps your interest, and I'd highly recommend this one. This little novel, The Patient, is one haunting, scary book. This is a little novella, and I highly recommend this book. This is about a patient in an institution, and everybody who comes into contact either kind of commits suicide, or something horrible happens to them, or they move to a different part of the country. They need to get away from this person, and nobody can cure him, and everybody's sort of given up. But there's this new hotshot psychiatrist who comes to this mental institution and wants to talk to this patient and try to solve what's going on with him and help him. The ending of this book is so creepy. If you want to be scared, I would recommend reading this book. It's really good. I would highly recommend it. So we're almost to the end, but Verity by Colleen Hoover is a really fun thriller. It's also actually really haunting, but it's fun at the same time. This is about a struggling author who is invited to finish the end of this famous author, Verity Crawford's best-selling series. And basically Verity Crawford is unable to write anymore, so she goes to Verity's house and starts looking through her office, and she kind of comes across these things that she's not supposed to see and starts discovering these dark secrets that Verity wouldn't want getting out. Alright, the last book is one that I haven't read, but it sounds amazing, and it is The Housemaid, and this is by Sarah A. Denzel. So this is basically about a housemaid who's hired to watch over this mansion, and really creepy things start to happen, and it sounds like a really good time, and it has a really high rating on Goodreads. So I am looking forward to reading this one. Alright, that is it for my video. If you are still here to the end, please leave a jack-o'-lantern emoji because you deserve a reward. This is such a long video, but thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you got some good suggestions and recommendations from this video, and I will talk to you all soon.